and welcome to this session on why prepare great CVs as a part of how to prepare a great CVs. So, what we're going to do, I'm Arun Singhal, your coach and mentor, and I will take you through this program, uh, this module to explain why do we need to prepare great CVs. So, as we've been doing so far, so let's look at what is the purpose of this module. And the purpose of this module is to provide you an in-depth understanding of why should you prepare grade CV, first of all. And at the end of this module, what will you learn? You will learn what will the grade CV do for you? How will it work for you? As a part of that, we will talk about something called JD requirements, job requirements. So, what do these job requirements look like? I'll show you that also, and we will discuss that. We will also we'll get an understanding of what happens when a CV is received at the recruiting company, the whole background process. It's important to understand that. Then we will talk about out of the job requirements or JD requirements that we talked, which ones are what are these called essential and measurable requirements and how do they impact your shortlisting? And then we can see what can you do to get your CV shortlisted. All right, ready for the ride today again? Wonderful. So let's have a small conversation on why prepare a great CV. So, so what do you think? Why should we prepare a great CV? Think about for a couple of minutes, couple of seconds, and then tally your notes with what I'm going to tell you. All right. So, a great CV, the primary purpose of a great CV is to get you shortlisted for the next round of selection process. The selection process might have multiple rounds. There are companies that have as many as 7 steps, and some companies have maximum 2 steps. So the CV, the great CV or the CV gets you shortlisted for the next round. It could be a group discussion, it could be a case submission, it could be a psychometric test, or even an interview directly. And how does it do that? So a CV basically matches with the required mention in the job description with respect to your qualification, experience, technical competencies, and behavioral competencies. So that's why we need to prepare a great CV because that's our entry into the selection process. So we talked about these JD requirements in these. So what do these JD requirements look like? So I'm showing you on a screen a typical job description of a placement officer at IIM Udaipur where I was working till about a month back. And what you see in this job description at the top is it defines the position, who does it report to, location, internal. It talks about the key responsibilities. Then at the bottom, it talks about what are the requirements in terms of qualification, in terms of minimum experience required, technical competencies required, and behavioral competencies required. So these are what you see encircled here on your screen is what is called the job requirements or JD requirements. All right. So what happens? Let's now look at what happens when your CV is received at a company. See, when a CV is received at the company, contrary to our belief that the person who is going to be doing the interview will look at it, normally a junior person looks at the CV and he or she compares the job requirements that we have defined earlier slide to see how much of it matches with your requirements. Your CV compares to the job requirements and what is the match? And if your CV matches the essential and measurable requirements in this job description, you get shortlisted, right? I am told, and I've not seen this, but nowadays there are softwares that run through lots of hundreds and thousands of CV that they are fed certain these minimum and essential job requirements, and based on that they select the CVs, shortlist the CVs. And your CV does not meet even one of the essential and measurable requirements. You are not shortlisted. We saw that earlier. So there were many requirements. So we will talk about what are the essential and measurable requirements. So there are essential and measurable requirements, and if you are not don't meet any one of them, you are not shortlisted. More your CV has your other requirements. There are other requirements listed there. So all those which we saw in the previous slide has lots of requirements. So there are essential and measurable requirements, and there are other requirements. more the CV meets the other requirements, higher the probability of you getting shortlisted, right? Many times your CV may not get shortlisted even after meeting the essential and measurable requirements. If they have received many applications and they have to shortlist only a fixed number. If the recruiting final person or the HR tells the junior person, hey, we have received thousands of applications, but give me only 100 shortlists. Don't give me more than 100. Then the person who's going to do the shortlisting will limit the number to 100. And if you are lucky one, within that you will get shortlisted. If you are not, you may be out of the process. So please understand that. So in such situation, they will look at the candidates whose CVs meets those essential and measurable requirements as well as who are better on other requirements because they're looking for the best of the candidates, right? Right. So you see, finally, it is a bit like Google Words key match game, right? You have seen that. You all know about that. When we search on Google, we feed certain words, and the Google brings out that. So it matches our requirements with what's available there. So similarly, in this shortlisting process, there are certain requirements that are the job description defined as essential and measurable requirements, and we will talk about this. What do these look like? And you win the game of shortlisting if you have more words matching in your CV. So, what you write in your CV is very important vis-a-vis the JD for which you are sending the CV. Please understand, it's a vis-a-vis the JD that you're sending. So, let's look at what are these essential and measurable JD requirements. Going back to the job description of the placement officer at IIM Udaipur, you see on your slide. So, what do you think are the essential and minimum requirements in this? Essential, minimum, and measurable requirements. Take a guess. All right. Let me share with you what there are two key essential and measurable requirements. In fact, they are the only essential and measurable requirements. The first one is educational qualification. The candidate must be a postgraduate management from a reputed management institute. And the second must is that he or she should have 2 to 3 years experience as a relationship manager, acquiring new and building existing institutional clients. So the CV shortlisting process, the junior person will say, hey, okay, these are the two essential measurable requirements, and this there will be agreement between the HR and the shortlisting person. Hey, you look at these two requirements. Anything that meets it, keep it in. Anything that doesn't meet any of them, keep it out. And I've used the same process many times to shortlist the CVs. So what can you do to make sure that your CV gets shortlisted? So is there a process? Is there a thinking that you can apply to make sure that when you send your CV gets shortlisted? Just something that you can do? Yeah. First thing is, as you see on your screen, is to read the JD carefully. So you're applying against a job. CV is, as I said, is sent only against a job description. If you don't have a JD, don't send your CV. It's a waste of your time and your CV. So you have a JD and you should look at the job description very carefully before sending your CV. In that, you need to identify what are the essential and measurable requirements. Why? Because that's the process. That's where the person who's going to do the shortlisting will already have some idea of what are the essential and measurable requirements, and then we'll look at your CV and say, does this person have what I'm looking for in terms of essential and measurable requirements? So you need to identify it yourself. And I would say, be your worst critic and say, do you have these requirements? Be the shortlisting person yourself and see whether you meet these requirements. If you don't, please don't send your CV. 99.9% chances that your CV will not get selected, will get rejected. If you meet, then please make sure that CV lists these requirements as well as other things that you have. And we will talk about this, how to do that when we talk of other module on how to modify your CV to meet the JD requirement. Right? Makes sense, guys and girls? Wonderful. Great. So we move forward. So what did we learn in this module? So what we learned is a great CV will get you shortlisted, and that's why you need to prepare a great CV for your next round of selection process. Your CV will get shortlisted only if it meets the essential and measurable job requirements defined in the JD, job description. So a JD has description of your responsibility and description of job requirements. So if you meet the minimum and measurable job requirements, your CV will get shortlisted. You now know, we talked about that. What are these essentials and measurable job requirements? And we know now that normally a junior person screens all the CV against these job requirements, and hence we know that we should send our CV only to those open positions where our CV meets this essential and measurable job requirements, right? So where do we go from here? So we go to the next module. I'm going to deep dive with you in the first part of the process after having understood why should we prepare a great CV into selecting the right CV format in which we will talk about how do we do today. I'll show you some great formats. I will tell you a right format also in that. So stay connected and I look forward to seeing you there. So thank you so much for watching this module. And I hope you like this module and I look forward to seeing you again in the next module. Thank you. See you again.